You've heard it 1,000 times. Just be yourself. The go-to advice for every awkward social situation, job interview, or first date. But no one talks about the fact that being yourself might be the most impossible task you face. I spent years trying to just be myself before realizing I had no idea who that person even was. We're living in the age of authenticity, where everyone's obsessed with living their truth. Yet we've never felt more lost, more anxious about who we really are. The more someone insists on social media that they're just being authentic, the more manufactured it probably is. And deep down, you feel it too. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre described this as bad faith, the self-deception where we deny our fundamental freedom by playing predetermined roles. We convince ourselves these roles are fixed and necessary. You see yourself as the quiet one or the funny friend, and these labels become prisons. Think about it. How many times have you caught yourself saying, "I'm just not the kind of person who," effectively placing limits on your own potential? I used to tell myself I wasn't the kind of person who could speak in public, until the day I had no choice but to give a presentation. And guess what? I survived. More than that, I actually enjoyed it. This is where the paradox begins. The more desperately you try to be authentic, the more inauthentic you feel. Because authenticity isn't something you achieve, it's something you experience when you stop trying so hard. David Foster Wallace captured this perfectly when he wrote about the terrible master our unexamined thinking becomes. We get so wrapped up in how we're being perceived that we forget to actually live. We're editing ourselves in real time, actors and audience simultaneously. The digital world has only intensified this problem. We now have quantifiable metrics for our authentic selves: likes, shares, and comments. We've created a marketplace of authenticity where the appearance of being real has become more valuable than actually being real. As the philosopher Byung-Chul Han notes, we're voluntarily exposing ourselves to constant evaluation, turning intimacy into a commodity. How many times have we found ourselves in this trap? Our social media presence was carefully crafted to appear effortless. We'd take 20 photos to find the one that looked most in the moment. We'd write and rewrite casual messages, but we eventually became exhausted by the performance of being ourselves. Research shows that this constant self-monitoring creates cognitive load, mental fatigue from overthinking every interaction. So how did we get here? As children, we're unfiltered expressions of our desires and emotions. Watch a toddler for 5 minutes. They don't worry about seeming authentic. They simply are. But slowly, society teaches us to suppress certain behaviors and emotions. This behavior is acceptable here, but not there. These emotions are appropriate sometimes, but not always. By adulthood, we've internalized so many rules about how to behave that we've lost touch with who we are. Donald Winnicott called this the false self, the mask we develop to gain approval. We become so skilled at shape-shifting to meet others' expectations that our true self gets buried under layers of performance. Maybe you remember the first time you saw your false self in action. You're at a dinner with colleagues, laughing at jokes you don't find funny, agreeing with opinions you don't share. And on the drive home, there's this feeling like you betrayed something inside yourself. Yet the next day, you do it again. Because the fear of rejection feels worse than the discomfort of being inauthentic. Carl Jung believed we all wear personas, social masks adapted to different situations. These aren't necessarily dishonest. They're how we navigate complex social landscapes. The problem comes when we mistake the mask for the face, when we can no longer distinguish between the roles we play and who we actually are. We have to look life in the eye. Those who seem most comfortable in their own skin rarely think about being authentic. Paradoxically, you're most yourself when you forget to think about being yourself. But complete authenticity isn't always desirable. Sometimes wearing social masks is necessary for survival. Think of marginalized groups who have to hide parts of themselves just to move safely through a hostile world. The privilege of just being yourself isn't equally distributed. As Oscar Wilde observed, man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask, and he will tell you the truth. This brings us to the hardest truth about authenticity. There is no static real you waiting to be discovered. The self is not a final destination, but a continuous process of becoming. So where does this leave us? If authenticity isn't something we can simply achieve, how do we move toward more genuine living? We need to abandon the quest for absolute authenticity. Instead of asking, "Am I being my true self?" ask yourself, "Am I living with integrity toward my values?" I learned this lesson from my grandfather, who never once used the word authenticity, but embodied it completely. What made him authentic wasn't that he always said what he thought. It was that his actions arose from deeply held principles rather than from fear or the desire for approval. Start with self-acceptance, not the Instagram version where you celebrate your flaws while subtly highlighting your strengths. I mean truly acknowledging the contradictions that make you human. You can be both confident and insecure, selfish and generous, brave and afraid, often within the same hour. The writer Brené Brown calls this embracing the discomfort of being real. Authenticity begins with accepting your incompleteness, your imperfection, your inconsistency. One powerful step is to practice self-awareness without judgment. Notice when you're performing rather than being. I keep a small notebook where I track moments of both authenticity and inauthenticity. Not to criticize myself, but to recognize patterns. Over time, these observations become invaluable data about your authentic inclinations. It also helps to create authenticity anchors, practices that ground you in your values. For me, it's writing every morning before checking my phone, a space where I can hear myself think before starting the day. For you, it might be meditation, a conversation with a friend, or physical movement. Another key is to selectively practice vulnerability. Cultivate relationships where you can gradually remove your masks. Even a single conversation where you express a difficult truth or reveal a protected part of yourself can break the cycle of performance. Do you remember that philosopher I mentioned earlier, Jean-Paul Sartre? He also said that existence precedes essence, meaning we define ourselves through our choices and actions, not through some predetermined essence. You create yourself through what you do, not through endless introspection about who you really are. The paradox resolves when we stop seeing authenticity as a binary state. Either you're authentic or you're not, and start seeing it as a practice, a continuous dialogue between your inner life and outer expression. There will be moments when being true to yourself means disappointing others, facing rejection, or stepping into uncertainty. I've lost relationships, opportunities, and comfort zones by choosing authenticity, but I've gained the confidence that comes from living on my own terms. As Kierkegaard put it, to be that self which one truly is. Not the self others expect, not even the self you once were or think you should be, but the self emerging through your choices right now. The authenticity paradox isn't solved by finding the real you, because you are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a process unfolding. Being yourself isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be worth it.